All right then, are we live? Yep, looks like we are again live. Welcome, all followers of darkness, shadow scavengers, and villainy aficionados. Welcome, I'm your host, Laura Shadows. Welcome, bienvenue to another Villains Review episode. And this time we're gonna do another very interesting villain that I was really kind of finding peculiar to talk about. And it's gonna be another main villain of a franchise coming from Pixar that I was being a fan ever since the first movie was released, which of course is The Incredibles. Now, when I'm talking about Incredibles, I'm talking about Incredibles 2, more precisely, Evelyn Dever, aka the Screenslaver. Now, to kind of like be on even though personally, like the character in the movie never actually accepted the title, she kind of used the Screenslaver, basically kind of like a pawn and everything. But and her being kind of like the mastermind and everything, you could kind of say that she is the original Screenslaver, even though she never actually accepted the title. But anyway, to kind of like going back to the overall Evelyn Dever, aka the Screenslaver, kind of like give you a little biography about the overall. Well, not biography, I would say overall backstory of the character. Basically, Evelyn Dever, she is the sister of Winston Dever, who is the CEO of a Winston technological company that sells technology all over the world, all kinds of gadgets and machines and everything, which was of course introduced in Incredibles 2. And Evelyn Dever was basically the brain behind all these inventions and all that. But of course, that was on the light side. Now, on the dark side, in the shadows, she was also this criminal mastermind who, through the character of the Screenslaver, created kind of like a conspiracy, basically, to kind of make sure that the supers remain illegal permanently. Now, before I go to her, I just want to say I already did a Villains Review episode of Syndrome in Season 1, so if you're interested to find more about that particular discussion, it's in the comment section down below. In the video description down below, alongside all other Villains Reviews Season 1 episodes as well. Now, with Evelyn Dever, aka the Screenslaver. Now, personally, I just want to say right off the bat, she's the type of those villains that usually I'm not quite a big fan of, which is kind of good guy, good guy, good guy, good guy, good guy, good guy, and then like drums, please, boom, it's a villain. After all this charade and everything, he or she is actually a villain. Tom, tom, tom. Even though, and again, those are the type of villains in stories that I'm not kind of like a big fan of and everything. And of course, when it comes to Evelyn Dever being the Screenslaver, you could have seen that miles away from the very beginning of the movie. With all the different hints and clues that she was releasing, throughout the entire movie, from her speeches, from her actions, from her personality. Literally everything, even when they were talking about the overall origin of kind of like of her villain origin, or so to speak, through the death of her parents and everything. So, she was kind of like this kind of surprise villain that you kind of saw it coming like a mile away and everything. But still, overall, for what the way how they executed her character, I felt like she was at least a bit interesting throughout the entire movie. Now, okay. Evelyn Dever, aka the Screenslaver. As I mentioned before, she doesn't officially get the title, but in a sort of way, technically, she is the original one. Anyway, so Evelyn Dever, what kind of villain she is? Well, basically, let's go a little bit. Let's go through her past. As I mentioned before. So Winston Dever, alongside her sister Evelyn Dever, their parents, were top supporters of superheroes, and then basically, one day when superheroes went underground, when of course after the entire Syndrome screw up, they became illegal, they went underground, and of course, at the top of that, one day some burglars, they entered their parents' house, and of course, their father was trying to, call, I think it was Geezer Beam, one of them, and the other one I think was Metaman. I'm not quite sure about that one. But anyway, he was trying to call them. And of course, one of the burglars, find out like, maybe he's calling the popo. Maybe he's calling the police. And of course, he just simply shot him. And then basically later on, a year later or something, the mother died as well, because of all that. I believe, I think, like, because of all the pain and grief and everything, for losing her husband and all that. So basically, just through that, we have a very, very typical or villain origin story, where basically, you have, like, a member of the family being killed and everything, and of course, like, even though he was killed, like, because of, like, the burger and everything. Of course, what Evelyn Dever does, which of course a lot of villains will do when, like, they lose a loved one, they will put the blame on someone or something that they will consider like the guilty one or guilty thing for what happened to that tragedy and everything. And that's the same thing what happened with Evelyn Dever. Now, Evelyn Dever, as a villain, she's basically, if you're gonna have to categorize her, she's basically a vengeful brainwasher. Like, because, like, basically, she doesn't have any physical abilities, like, she doesn't have any weapons or anything. Like, basically, the only weapons that she has was basically those hypnotic gadgets, that she created, inside the Winston Dever's, her brother's company. Again, like I said, she doesn't have any hand-to-hand combat skills. She doesn't have any firearm skills. She doesn't have any, actual, like, physical skills, in general. Everything, it's in her mind. Like, basically, her mind, her genius is the only weapon that she uses, which, of course, when you have criminal masterminds, usually are types of villains, who the only weapon they have, of course, is their intelligence, is their, overall genius. And Evelyn Dever is technically one of them, for example, I can't believe it was a pizza delivery guy, but still, the way how she used the pizza delivery guy to basically work as a pawn to all her schemes, not just simply, to kind of like, create a picture of, like, like, not simply of this, like, new threat that is, like, threatening the city or Elastigirl or everyone else, but also at the same time, try to create something that will not lead directly to her, to kind of like make her look clean, and so, if, of course, if one day her pawn gets arrested, there will be no evidence, that will kind of lead to her, of course, until Elastigirl somehow find out those evidence, through the through the hypnotic goggles and everything, which, again, that overall villain reveal, it was like I saw it miles away coming. Okay, but anyway, so, I mean, again, I went all over the place, but let me try to kind of like summarize about Evelyn Dever, basically. So, like I said, the overall skills that she possesses are all in the mind. Like, when it comes to, I could say she also has like some strategy, skills, some tactical skills, some, like, even manipulation type of skills. The way how she manipulated, Elastigirl, her brother, all the other, supers and everything. Like, she also kind of like, you can kind of say she also uses deception at the same time, but basically every single skill that she possesses are usually, like I said, are mental skills. The power, like, of her mind, the power of her genius, the power of, like, her speech, and the basically also the power of persuasion. So like I said, her ultimate weapon basically for the entire movie was her brain, her mind. Now, again, now, of course, one of the things that I always usually talk about is, of course, the overall goal. What is Evelyn Dever's, aka the Screenslaver's, goal? Very simple: avenge her family, but so in a way that will make supers illegal permanently. They're just trying to make sure they never became legal again. Because, like I said before, like, because of her parents' death, what happened and everything, she, even though literally what happened to them, was literally an accident, it is something that usually, even in real life, will happen, almost all the time. Evelyn Dever, unlike, just like, Winston Dever, she took that very personally. Of course, for them, to losing their parents and everything, of course, that's absolutely tragic, which leaves, a very big could leave a very big, mental scar. Now, Winston Dever, her brother, kind of took it a little bit much more well and lighter, unlike her sister, because, like, Evelyn Dever took that in, like, very, very personally, in a much more darker way, in which, like, her sorrow, like her sadness, became grief leaded to anger, anger leaded to hatred, and a hatred leaded to revenge, basically. So literally, even though it was the burglar's fault, she basically threw the blame on the supers, because how, like, her father basically was so dependable on them, which of course, is one of the things that also, when she was talking to Elastigirl in the when it was kind of like freezing and everything, which basically, it was done in a very villain classic, like monologue type of way. She basically explained that, not only that her parents were dependable on superheroes, but also, like, basically didn't, like, humanity depends too much on superheroes, which of course, in the end made her realize that superheroes keep us weak, which kind of also in a way made her very similar to Lex Luthor. In a strange way, it made her similar, to me at least, to Lex Luthor, So it kind of made me realize that Evelyn Dever is basically kind of like Incredible's version of Lex Luthor, basically. Because Lex Luthor also hated Superman, because he was because he was an alien, because he wasn't human, because he had all these extraordinary strength and everything, all these abilities, and he was just a mere human. But just like Evelyn Dever and Elastigirl, Lex Luthor used his mind, his overall genius, his overall intelligence to go up against Superman. And again, Evelyn Dever did the same thing, because, like I said, both, okay, Lex Luthor maybe a little bit, but like Evelyn Dever, like, she doesn't have any physical skills, no weapons knowledge, no, like, she doesn't have literally, anything except her mind. And like I said, you can also put her in the category as a criminal mastermind, like the brain behind the operation, like basically using her henchman or someone like as a pawn, until, all this time, and she's like, kind of like plotting in the shadows, basically, that's the type of villain, Evelyn Dever, the Screenslaver, is. Now, one of the things, like I said, even though, like, her goal again is very simple, because, again, we're talking about revenge, and that's literally what she wanted: revenge against, all the supers, because she blamed them for what happened to her parents, as I mentioned, all on and on and on and on. So even though, like I said, even though throughout the movie, I will say this, she did actually a pretty good job, because, like I said, the most of the work, most of the physical stuff, most of, like, the showmanship stuff, let's just put it that way, the Screenslaver, this like pawn, this puppet that she used, for the pizza delivery guy, because because he was under her control. Most of the stuff, it was this Screenslaver faker that did all, the presentation, all the, like, he was kind of like, the what's the word I'm looking for? He was kind of like, the main target, basically, through everything that was happening for the movie, while Evelyn Dever, again, she was plotting from the shadows, kind of like, making her name and herself looking clean, so that no one would have any suspicion on her, which, again, one other thing that I repeated, countless times, which, again, it's a very typical thing for a criminal mastermind to do, And even though, so, yeah, I mean, and again, I will give her credit, because, like, even though, like I said, most of the physical stuff the fake Screenslaver did, I will give her credit, for all this, like, plotting and scheming and, like, creating all this, like, diabolical plan to make to make the supers look, bad, evil and everything, to make sure they never became, legal again, because, and everything, which kind of also, you can kind of say, I mean, it wasn't shown a little bit, but also kind of, was there were also some signs of, like, obsession with, like, trying to make sure they never became legal again and everything, just a little bit of obsession, even though personally, even though it was mostly, like I said, the most of the things that Evelyn Dever throughout the movie as a villain, the most of the things that she usually shown, especially through the monologue part, was, anger, grief, hatred, sorrow, and anger. I think I said anger twice. Like, usually those are the things, that she usually shown, in the movie, especially when she was revealed to be the criminal mastermind behind all of this, which kind of, again, leads you to like, the conclusion that all she did was for revenge. And again, when you have revenge, it could be a motivation, but it can also be her downfall. And that's exactly, what happened. I mean, one of the other things I will also add to the addition to like, revenge being her downfall is also that she also underestimated Elastigirl and the Incredibles. Like she was trying to be a few steps ahead, but like, I mean, who the hell can predict like, someone like Jack, or even like, the kids coming to the rescue and everything, like, who could predict that? I mean, not even Syndrome, even he couldn't predict, what Jack basically had installed for him and everything. So yeah, like that also kind of, shows that she, which again, very classical weakness for villains, underestimating your opponents. And that's exactly also what she did. She was so sure that, her plan will work and everything, especially, with like leading the ship towards the city, which also kind of brings me to another point. She never gave a shit about like, even like if some civilians died, because like with the ship crashing on the docks of the city, I mean, let's just say a lot of civilians would have get hurt or died, and she wouldn't give a shit. She would just simply, get on her plane, get away, and that's it. Like, everything else, she doesn't give a fuck. Which again shows like, also how a little bit cold-blooded she is and everything. Although but also the other thing that will give her credit also is that she, in a way, cares for her brother. Like for example, when she took him from the room when all the like politicians, all the superheroes were hypnotized, like she took him from the room, tried to get him on the plane, to kind of like make sure like he doesn't get hurt. So in some way you can also see that she also, she cares for her own family. In this case, her brother, even though she does call him a child, because like, and her basically him saying, that, oh, like, the parents died because supers went away, but even again, even though without the supers, what happened to, their father was, still a tragedy. But again, it was an accidental tragedy. Like he was trying, even though, Evelyn Dever did say, that his wife was trying to get him into the safe room and everything, but he wanted to call the supers, and everything, because he, even though I would kind of give her credit that she was a little bit too much dependable, on them and everything, which also is the reason why why I said, that she kind of reminds me of Lex Luthor. But overall, again, to kind of like basically, basically go a little bit, kind of through the Evelyn Dever thing, I mean, like even like through the actions that she did, like I said, you can put her as, a super villain at the same time, but you can also at the same time, she is also through some actions, she proved herself to be a terrorist, because she wasn't doing just simple crimes, around the city, but she also did some crimes that could involve, like not just simply international problems, but like worldwide problems. So, especially with making superheroes, illegal and everything. So you can kind of put her also, as a terrorist when it comes to the overall, category, but overall, like I said, even though, again, she's also kind of that type of villain that you don't have too much to talk about, but, she was still impressive for what, for the way how Brad Bird used her and everything. The overall execution was still, impressive. And we have a comment. Of course, no one else's FRC. Good old FRC. Not as good as the Legend Syndrome, but a solid Pixar villain nonetheless. Keep up with the quality streams by my good-looking friend. Well, thank you, FRC. Thank you very much for the compliment. Yes, I do agree. If I have to make basically, if I have to make a competition between the Screenslaver and Syndrome, Syndrome will still win the cup as the best, Incredibles villain, and also one of my fair, top 3 Pixar villains in general, But I do also agree, she was a solid villain in general, But again, She doesn't beat Syndrome, not at all. She doesn't even come close to him. Because like when you look at Syndrome, like he had a much more interesting, much more richer goal and reasons behind it, the motivation, the overall origin, what pushed him to become a villain, everything. Like Syndrome as a villain, he was much more richer. When it comes to the overall Evelyn Dever as the Screenslaver, she was very, very basic. I mentioned that a couple of times throughout the video. Her origin, her family died, father because of the burglary, mother because of the pain and loss and everything. She was like, in grievance. She was saddened. She was like, filled with like, rage and pain and anger and thirst for vengeance, against the supers because she blamed them because, not just simply how her father was dependable on them, but basically everyone was dependable on them, which kind of, basically turn her, which gonna basically, transform her into a vengeful brainwasher. Again, the main point of her goal was revenge. Again, very classic, very old school. All the motivations lead it to that. And when it comes to overall skill, like I said, like she doesn't have any physical skills. Like, like I said, she has genius level intellect, manipulation, deception, hacking, which is one of the things I forgot to mention, intimidation, also, the gadgets that produce, hypnosis. That's also kind of like, you can consider as as a power or skill, intimidation, and, also I will also even add, like I said, manipulation. Like I said, the way how she manipulated everyone, from her brother, the supers, Elastigirl, the public, like literally everyone, which I will say, those are all great skills, but they're skills of a criminal mastermind. So, but even still, criminal masterminds are still, can be pretty cool villains, but in Evelyn Dever's case, she was a solid one, So which kind of brings me also to my rankings, like 1 to 10 shadows. Now, how, my rank now again, above Syndrome, like not possible. But I still enjoyed her as an overall villain. So, as a, itself and everything. So I will give her, I have to, look, she still tried to have like a pretty good fight against Elastigirl, but it wasn't like nothing special, because like I said, she doesn't have any combat skills. It was all in the mind. It was all in the brain, and including also her motivation, what pushed her to be the Screenslaver and everything, and the way how she used the puppet pizza delivery guy as a pawn to kind of like, draw, everyone's attention to kind of like this new bad guy coming to town and everything, and making sure that the supers became illegal. And also the way how she used her hypnosis to hypnotize all those heroes and everything. That is still impressive. But again, with everything coming together, I will give the Screenslaver, screw it. After all of that, I'm going to give, Evelyn Dever as a villain. Yeah, I'm going to give her a 6.5 out of 10. Yeah, as a villain. It's, again, she wasn't bad. She was a solid one, When it comes to her goal, her motivation, very classic, very old school, but nothing special about it, and even her character, it was interesting. At some points, I liked her monologue, the way how she delivered her speech and the reason behind it, why she did what she did, throwing all that anger and hatred and sadness, grief, to the face of, into Elastigirl's face and everything, and kind of like the teasing of this mastermind behind the shadows and everything, but still it goes to a 6.5 out of 10 for me, at least. You guys can rank her the way how you want, but for me, she is a 6.5 out of 10, a solid overall villain in general. Which also, where we are now, it comes to an end to another villains review episode. Yes, we reached another end. I hope you guys enjoyed my overall new episode of Villains Review. You guys, you all know the drill. Comment, like, subscribe, give me your own personal thoughts about Evelyn Dever, aka the Screenslaver in general. What you thought of her as a villain or as a character itself? What did you thought about Incredibles 2 as a movie? In general, everything in the comment section down below. Until then, stay tuned for another Villains Review episode next week. And like always, Lord of Shadows, signing off. And, of course, in the wise words of Beetlejuice, later, fuckers.